I hugged my mom tighter as the fire climbed my back. That's how Avonley Lightstone's story begins, but it's not where it ends. Have you ever felt something was wrong but couldn't explain it? Like the person you love was slowly chipping away at your sense of self?
Believe me, we have been there. Different marriages, but to the same man, with the same toxic pattern. But God was still working.
We're Lizzie and Deana, women of faith, survivors, and truth tellers.
Surviving toxic relationships is for any woman stuck in confusion, healing after betrayal, or just searching for her voice again.
You are not crazy.
You are deeply loved.
Welcome back to Surviving Toxic Relationships. I'm Lizzie, and with me is Deana. Today's guest is Avonley Lightstone, the author of Strength of Scars, a raw and redemptive autobiography that shares her powerful journey from tragedy to triumph. At just 3 years old, Avonley tried to save her mother from a house fire. Her mother did not survive, and soon after, her father placed her up for adoption. What followed was years of emotional, physical, and mental abuse, but also a path of faith, healing, and resilience. Through her book, her speaking, and her bold transparency, Avonley helps others see that beauty can rise from brokenness and the strength can be found even in scars. Today, she's here to share her testimony, the ways God carried her through the darkest valleys, and how anyone listening can find freedom, healing, and purpose, no matter what they've been through. Avonley, I just can't say enough how we are so excited you are here today, and we know that your story will resonate with so many who will be listening.
I appreciate you guys hosting this, and it's an honor being on your show.
Our pleasure.
Like you said on my biography, I was 3 years old when I was trying to save my mother from a house fire. My dad was drunk, passed out, unresponsive. When that was happening, I tried to wake him up and he just wouldn't wake up. So I just felt like I needed to do something. And so I went and tried to wake him up and he just wouldn't budge. So I didn't really care to hear the pain that my mom was going through. And I felt like as a 3-year-old, what's the best thing that I could do? Well, usually when a kid gets hurt or injured, parent usually comes and kind of nurtures them and makes them feel okay, like gives them a hug of some sort. And that's exactly what I did. I did what naturally came to me was I went and hugged my mom as tight as I could, and she was trying to push me away and I just wouldn't let go. And pretty soon the fire came up my back, my legs, and I could feel the pain, and I wanted to go to the pain, but I didn't. I just hugged her tighter because she wasn't responding when she was screaming and yelling. So I just hugged her tighter and she was pushing me away. So from my scream is what woke up my dad. He woke up and then I realized I was at the hospital, and I lived in a poor area in India. It was one of the biggest cities in the world, but we didn't have advanced technology like we do now. And one of the things I didn't have was any sort of like numbing agent to help numb the pain that I was going through. And because my clothes was burnt onto my skin, then they had to like scrub that off of me. So I was placed in this bathtub, and yeah, they just scrubbed my back. And during that process, my body was going through a lot of shock and trauma because I was hurt and agony, and I was feeling like my senses was coming back. There's a point when you get burned that it hits a nerve and you just can't feel it anymore. But now that I wasn't in that place and I was getting ready to be cleaned up, oxygen was coming through my body and my body was going into this healing phase. And so that was really painful. It's just getting my back scrubbed, and that was worse than being caught on fire itself. I would rather be burned alive than going through that pain of just being scrubbed. That was like one of the worst feelings I've ever dealt with in my entire life. And so I just remember like my body was in shock, was going through so many different levels of emotion. Like my bowels weren't like functioning right. I had diarrhea, and it was not a good time. And so after that I was placed on a cot. As you can see, like my face isn't burnt, and then my like chest area and my belly wasn't burnt. So I had to lay on a cot to air dry, and so I was on there recovering for quite some time. My mom, however, she was burned the top of her head to the tips of her toes. She was completely like burned, unrecognizable. And so she didn't survive it. Maybe like three days later, she passed away. And during those time when my mom was alive, my dad did show up just to check up on us. But after that time was when I felt rejected and abandonment, because my dad stopped showing up. He didn't show up anymore. And so here I am, lost my mom from a fire, and I'm on this cot trying to air dry, trying to recover. And there was nobody that was coming to even check up on me. And that was really sad, because I had a lot of siblings in India. I had about 9 siblings, and they kind of all stopped showing up once my mom passed away. So I was just kind of recovering by myself alone. So that point in my life, I wasn't quite sure what was going on. I was going through a lot of emotional trauma, emotional pain, and it didn't make sense of what I was going through, because before, even though we were poor, like my mom was really good parent. She was a good mother, she was loving, she was nurturing. So I had a lot of that like symbolism of love, and then it was like taken from me, and I wasn't quite sure like why or how. At a 3-year-old trying to digest that plus healing, that was just so much.
That's huge. Like I was just trying to think of just like 3 that to even remember that, probably because of the trauma, wow, that's heartbreaking. I'm so sorry.
Yeah, and that is something like I get a lot is, how can you remember that at a 3-year-old? But when you go through a lot of traumas in your life, like something so emotionally impactful that's going to change the rest of your life, you're going to remember. Like, it's haunting. But I was also, I think what was the beautiful thing about the whole shock part of it was, I think God was also showing me that loving, tender care that I had from my mom, and then just a little bit of memory before my accident. And I think I was really taking that part in when I was recovering in the hospital by myself, because I was going through like a lot of like trying to recoup what was going on. So I believe at that point I was remembering, I kept a vivid memory of certain things that happened in my life, which was really amazing, because that's kind of what really helped me a lot during my younger youth. After I did recover, I was then taken home, and my dad allowed me to go to our church that we usually went to pay respect to my mother, because I wasn't there at their service. And so I was in my like blue underwear. I felt like Mowgli off of Jungle Book, because I was still healing, and I paid my respect. And it wasn't, I would say maybe the next day, I was taken to the orphanage. And again, right there, I felt so abandoned and rejected. Like, what's going on? I was so excited to see my family, my siblings, my grandparents, even my dad. I didn't quite understand why he was doing what he was doing. And so, yeah, I was in the orphanage, and after 2 weeks, I noticed that he brought 3 of my siblings into the orphanage. So it was really nice to see familiar faces. And so in the orphanage, we were groomed to be ready for our families in America. During the time that I was in the orphanage, the first 2 or 3 times, we ran away. We ran back to the house, because my older sister, she was 9 at the time, she knew like the geographic area, and she knew, I don't know how she did it, but I just followed her, and we just ran back home, and my dad kept taking us back, and eventually he ended up taking us to a different orphanage. And we tried running away there, but we got lost, and a cop found us, took us back to the orphanage, and that's when we decided like there's no way we can go back, and we just accepted our defeat and allowed whatever the orphanage wanted us to be like, and they groomed us. They groomed us to be ready for our families in America. And so eventually I ended up getting adopted into a home in America where my mom was abusive, mentally, physically, and emotionally abusive. And it wasn't that way like all of a sudden. It probably took like 6 months, but that's kind of pretty quick after you just got adopted. But I remember feeling so excited. So I was adopted into a family with two other of my biological siblings. So I was very fortunate to at least have them. And so just a little backstory with my mom and my dad. They had adopted 14 kids, and they had adopted 3 boys before they adopted like the rest of the 11 kids. And in that time that they raised those 3 boys, there was always that scapegoat, there was that golden child, there was, they were all just trying to like please my mom and just try to get her love, and she abused a lot of them too. And so my dad wasn't really thrilled, my adopted dad, he wasn't really thrilled to have all of us adopted. He has told us many times. And I think a lot of it was because of how those 3 brothers were raised. And he was kind of abused himself in many ways, and controlled by my mom. And so there wasn't a lot that he can do to like help be part of the family and maybe even discipline or even take the kids. He couldn't do a lot of like correction. And so when my mom decided, hey, I want to keep adopting, my dad was like, no, I don't want anything to do with the kids. But he ended up becoming a bright light for our family, a lot of the kids, because he grew up with a loving home and he's never been abused. His mom and his dad were really good to him, so he only knew that. And so he was just a really good guy, and that's what he showed us kids, is his love. My mom, however, after 6 months, I'll go back into the story, after 6 months, my mom started becoming very abusive. And I just don't know, I think it was because we started picking up English very well and we started meshing in, that we didn't really need, I guess, her to help us out. So we grew up in a really small town, and so like learning English, we just had to adapt really fast to be able to fit into that society. Otherwise, there was nobody that spoke the language that we spoke, and so we quickly learned English. However, at that time, we did come to America with 8 different dialects, and that was really challenging for me because especially when it came to like learning, I struggled with learning and I had dyslexia. So a lot of things were like confusing. I would think something would come out differently on my mouth, or even like writing it on paper, it would be completely opposite or different. And my S's would look like 8s. I would confuse S's with 8s. Just, how dyslexia is. And so I really struggled with that, and I didn't get the proper help that I needed. But my mom would get the grades and she would see that I failed a lot of my classes, and my teachers would say, I'm really concerned for Avonley, like we need to like do some tutoring. And she wouldn't say no because she had an image, right? And so she would allow me to get the help that I needed. But then after school, I would have to go down in my basement and do lessons. And the lessons, she would never teach me. And I would just have to like learn it on my own. And I remember crying all the time, like, I don't get it. Like, I'm a visual learner, and if she could just like sit down and like show me how it's done, maybe a couple times, I probably would have gotten it. But she found joy in a lot of my humiliation, my struggles, and so I would just be left down there alone. My sister, eventually, my older sister, she had a really hard time connecting with my mom, and because she was just taken from her family, and she was much older. She had a lot more memories than I even had, and she would just tell my mom, like, you're not my mom. And I want my mom. Where's my mom? And my mom didn't like that. That would trigger her. And that same aspect happened with my older brothers that they adopted, but they were already out of the house by the time they adopted us 11. But yeah, so she just didn't know how to nurture her. And when you're taking an older child, you gotta take extra precaution, extra steps, extra nurturing time to help this individual. And she wasn't getting it. And it wasn't that my sister was mean or rebellious. She wasn't. She was just needing some love. And she just needed to have some sort of understanding that she was okay. And she wasn't getting that. And so therefore, my mom ended up, that was like a tipping point where she started hurting me. And every time my sister would react, I would get punished. And I wouldn't even do anything. I would just get punished for no reasons. And a good example would be like, I don't know how I was always able to keep my rooms clean. I would always make my bed. My room was clean, and my other siblings, their rooms weren't clean, but I wasn't worried about that. I just liked my space clean, and that was a trigger for her. So when my sister reacted, she would just come into my room, strip my bed, throw my clothes out of the closet, throw all my toys away, just and said, "You got to clean up, your room is a mess." And I just didn't understand, like, why would you do that? And so I wouldn't complain. I would just get back up and just start cleaning. It would take me all day, and a lot of times I wouldn't be able to eat. So I went without eating maybe a few days sometimes, with just for punishment. And so there was just a lot of things that she was doing that was just hard, and a lot of punishments that she would give me. It was just kind of a lot of like bizarre things. And I remember this one time I went to I guess like Walmart, and it was like 2 hours away. And my mom would, whenever she went to grocery shopping, she would make sure she had her month's worth because we lived far away. And this one time we went to this thrift store, which here it's called Deseret Industry. It's a DI thrift store. And she gave each one of the kids $5 to spend, and she didn't give me anything. So we would all take turns going into DI, grabbing something that was worth $5, and it was just like a really fun treat. And so when my turn was up, I was so excited to go in because, any child is wanting like a goodie. And she didn't give me anything, and my grandma was with us, and so my grandma had saw all the kids getting their $5, but she didn't see me getting any. So she actually went with me, and so I was browsing. I saw this hot, shocking pink nail polish, and it was 25 cents, and I really wanted it. But I didn't have money, and I saw all the toys that my siblings were getting from their $5, and I couldn't get anything. But I ended up stealing that nail polish, and then I put it in my pocket and just went about my business. And I came home, and I got so excited. This is the thing that always gets me into trouble. I get excited, and I open my mouth, and I tell my biological sister, she's the middle child, and I tell her, like, "Hey, look, I got this." She's like, "But you didn't get any money. How did you get this?" I'm like, so I believe I made up a story. I don't know. And so she ends up telling my mom and my sister, who is the golden child, and my mom gets really upset and said that I'm going to go to jail, and starts disciplining me. And I remember being in tears in the bathroom because it was only 25 cents, and she took the nail polish and told me that I have to make up for it. So I had all this chore that I had to do just to make up for, rather than explaining like, "Hey, you don't steal, that's not right." It was fear-based, and she was really like taking a lot of like things on like a different level where it was just really haunting in many ways. And I remember that you think as a parent you get over it after you discipline your kid, but she didn't. She carried on. Me like had stolen that pink nail polish. And so when Halloween came around, I wasn't able to go trick-or-treating, but she made it like that I was gonna go, but at the very last minute she would say, "You're not going." I'm like, "Why?" "Because you stole that nail polish, which was like 4 months ago at that time, and you still need to learn from that lesson." So I remember just crying, and it was spooky. So she stayed home and it was spooky, and she would turn off all the lights, and the house was literally spooky because she would have like scary movies going on, and I just didn't ever feel safe. And I remember like wanting to go downstairs where there was light because I was attracted to like light. Like I just felt safer. And so I remember trying to go downstairs, and my mom would tell me, go back upstairs. And I would kind of start sneaking up back down, and she would sneak back up, and she was like right there in my face. It was like the most chilling, scariest thing for a 6-year-old at that time to ever feel like. I didn't think I was getting anything from her. So she was like all night. She would just like haunt me and scare me. And so I remember finally like, I'm not gonna deal with this. I'm just gonna go to bed. And then Christmas rolls along, and my teacher, she bought me this pop-up tent because she asked me like, hey, like what do you want for Christmas? So she asked me a list of things that I wanted, and one of the things I saw in a magazine earlier was a pop-up tent. And just using your imagination as a child, I got so excited, like this is what I want for sure. And so she ended up getting that for me for Christmas. And I remember going to my grandpa's house and seeing the tent, and I just went and grabbed it, and because I was so surprised. Oh my gosh, this is exciting. And my mom took that from me and said, you still have to be punished because you stole that pink nail polish. You're not going to get this until you learn your lesson. Well, I guess I never learned my lesson because I've never gotten that. So there was many times where I would get in trouble. I would go downstairs and just look at my tent that she had in the basement stored away, just imagining like, whoa, what would it be like to just have that tent and to be able to play in it. She still has it unopened to this day in that same place. But yeah, so it's just a lot of things like that happen, and eventually like the physical abuse really did happen. Like I was a trigger for her. I don't know why I was a trigger for her. My parents would be branding calves, and I remember wanting to help them brand, but my mom would never let me. She's like, no, you're not going to, because she saw that anything that I enjoyed, she took that away from me. And I really enjoyed working on the ranch with my dad, and I remember like she telling me like, no, you can't come down and brand with us. So then I just stayed at the house and played with my siblings, and we were just having fun. We were just giggling, and next thing I know, my siblings all just ran away, and I'm just like impersonating a donkey. I remember impersonating a donkey. We were just playing some fun games, and the next thing I know, I see my mom opening the door, and she grabs me and she takes a board and she starts spanking me, and that board had nails in it. And I remember like getting like the nails just jabbed into my bum and like crying. Like, I don't know what I did. I'm just having fun. So I really don't know exactly what many of the reasons why I was getting in trouble for. And any like happiness that I would have, just even laughter, it was a killjoy for her. She couldn't handle it. So yeah, there was just a lot of like abuse when my older sister, you know how I said I would get punished. Well, this one time I was really terrified because my sister at the time was hitting puberty, and a lot of the guys were starting to like her. And it wasn't like she was into them. She was, she's just being a girl, a teenage girl. And my mom, they had a fight. And my mom, my sister comes up to her room, ignores my mom, yells at her, and my mom comes up and rips her clothes apart and starts like aggressively abusing her and touching her in places that she shouldn't be. I remember just being there in the hallway just watching what was happening, and I told myself like, I don't ever want to be a woman again. I don't want to ever grow up, because I knew you're not going to be a child any longer. There was a time when my mom wanted 2 more adopted kids after us 3, and after 6 months of them being adopted, my brothers sexually abused my sisters. I remember they would take them into the wood, not the older ones, the ones that were actually adopted into, like, that I grew up with. I remember them taking them out into the field and into the wood, and I knew that something was wrong, but I needed to protect them. I'm like, I have to do something. I gotta say something, because I remember being adopted and feeling so culture shocked in many ways and trying to like fit in. And here they were assaulted so quickly in like a very harmful way. And I finally had the courage to go and face my mom and tell her, like, hey, you need to help my sisters, they're getting hurt. And she's like, don't ever come into my room, leave right now. So yeah, I did leave, and I was hoping that she took what I said seriously, but she didn't. And so they ended up being raped their entire lives, even after they graduated from high school. There's just so many stories, that one story after another. But I had to figure out a way to write this in my book. And one of the things I was really fortunate was being adopted into a family that was religious, even though I don't believe a lot of the things that they teach. However, I was really grateful knowing that God existed. And I think that was an anchor for me as a young child, is knowing, okay, you can talk to God, you can pray to God, and He'll be there for you. So I really took that to heart. I felt like that was the only way for me to survive, and that was my only saving grace. I did take that and started to pray. I just knew like God was something big, and there was a reason why He wanted me alive. There had to be a reason. And so I just had the faith to just keep talking to Him and praying to Him. So during my hard times, I would just go out in the field and just pray to Him for comfort, for strength. I would teach my cows and horses about the gospel, because I was just really excited to know that God was like alive and He was real, and I just wanted to share it with my animal friends. So that was what helped me to have a structure of who God was, because there was a lot of things that happened in my life, childhood, where I shouldn't have survived. There was things that I should have just would have died, but God spared me over and over again, or He protected me from certain harm that could have been really scary. I knew from the get-go that my mom was abusive, but I didn't know what the word to use, and I was so shy that I never really asked for help. And when I did, there was a lot of people that would say, I can't believe that you would say these things about your mom when your mom was so kind to adopt all you kids. So I kind of stopped reaching out to people, because it's not what the mindset I had. I really wanted help. I wasn't trying to get my mom into trouble. And one of the things I like to share is, as I'm completely burned on my back, and it just got to the point where my skin never healed and never recovered. And I could stab myself with a pin and not even have any sort of feeling. What I'm trying to get at is when you take in people's negative abuse and you're holding it in, you're not giving your body time to heal, and you're poisoning yourself. So eventually, when I did end up finding my husband and I fell in love, that's when I learned what love was. Touch is really important. What you say, like good affirmation, like you are sweet, you are beautiful. When you hear those things, those are powerful words, and they actually heal. And I use my back as an example, because as I started learning to heal, I started healing my back. And so now my skin isn't as like this rhino, I guess a shield. It was hard, but it's now soft. So you could take a little tiny pin and you can poke me and I could feel it. This is why I'm saying, like, words are really powerful. And make sure that you don't internalize what people say about you, especially if it's not true. You can accumulate a lot of like unhealthy diseases in your own body if you just you're taking things in. You're not giving it a place to like go out. So try to do your best to find someone that can help you, that could encourage you and is uplifting for you. And also find God. God was my number one source. And you start developing this relationship until you get to that point where you really know who he is. And you gotta give him a try. Don't take your problems to him and just say, you're awful, I don't trust you, and become like, how dare you to put me in through all this trials and have me deal with it. Like, God's not like that. There's a reason why he probably has you go through it, because he probably has chosen you to be a voice for someone else. You never know like the tool that he's using you for. You never know the strength that he's using you from. So just know, like, because you're going through it, your scars isn't something that defines you. It's something that shows your resilience, your strength. And that is what God sees in you. And just be like in gratitude, knowing that, oh my gosh, God would really place me in this wickedness, yet there's a purpose and he's using me. You don't know it. And since I was little and even now, he's my anchor. And that's it's really been my help in able to overcome any of these obstacles that I go through.
So Avonley, your story is pretty amazing. I mean, it's really amazing. And most little kids haven't gone through nearly what you've been through. I mean, but there are people who have been through really awful things as a young child and as an adult. So for those people that are out there saying, my life was so awful and so hard, and I was a little kid and I didn't deserve that. Maybe they were sexually abused, or like you said, you were put in a foster home, or they adopted you, but it still wasn't a nice and kind, nurturing environment by any means for you. But there are people out there that are really angry at God, or maybe they don't believe in God at all, because they're like, how could a good God, allow me to go through something like this? What would you say to somebody that's in that place where they're just like, no good God in heaven would allow a child to lose their mom and then be in an abusive home? So I know you have your book, Strength of Scars, and it's a really encouraging book about how you've gone through so much pain in your life, but the scars have been the stronghold, the strength that you have today.
So that is actually more common than we realize. I've been there. I've even was angry with God. There's times where I said, like, how can you let me survive this fire and have my mom gone and then go into this abusive home where I've endured a lot of pain and trials. And yeah, I've asked those questions, and you know what? It always comes back to this one thing, is God creates beauty, and in the beauty there's brokenness, and in those brokenness there is beauty. So if you look all around the world, you'll see like certain landscape that's ugly, and then you'll see amazing landscape that's like jaw-dropping, and most people gravitate towards the jaw-dropping landscape. But if you take the time to go through the landscape that's not as beautiful, and you really go into how it's structured and how it's built, you'll start seeing that there's also beauty in it. There's certain animals that thrive in there, and there's certain way that landscape is able to survive. It's like there's people that are adventurous that go into these treacherous landscape, and they want to see how they could survive, like in the canyons. And it's like, you go through that and you make it, people are gonna say, oh my gosh, not everyone can go through that, and only certain amount of people that have the strength, that have the mindset, is able to see the beauty in that and able to go through it, whereas anybody can enjoy the beautiful landscape. And it also kind of goes back into like how God gives each one of us choice, so because we were abused, like, I don't understand why my mom did what she did, but God is also giving her a chance to have her own journey. She ends up making mistakes along the way and ends up doing things that has been hurtful to a lot of us by her own action. But he didn't stop her from being able to try to make the right or wrong choices. He was allowing her to make choices that would be helpful, but he can't force that person to make that right choice. Otherwise, it takes away our free agency. And yes, he's in pain. He even tells us, like, when we get persecuted, he's right there being persecuted as well alongside us. He's in that pain with you. He endures it. So, like, for me, I look back and I'm really grateful because in many ways I saw my mom as a teacher. I saw that, hey, I used her in many ways. Like, you think I'm not going to succeed in life? I will show you. You think I'm just this awful girl? I'm a good girl, and I will show you. So I guess it's just the way you choose to carry yourself. It's all about the mindset. Make the best and the most out of every decision that you have. Yes, in the environment as a child, it's going to be hard to escape it because you have to live with your family and you have to endure that pain. So to those people, I say, to those children, just cling on to anyone that's going to help give you that love. Find that love. Like, don't hold that in. Find it. Find it through a teacher. Find it through, like, a friend, and reach out to, like, God. Talk to him and ask him to protect you. There's people that's endured pain, and now God's, like, allowing us to be a beacon to those that are still hurting. So take every possible moments of your trials into something that you can work through, and that your story could be something that's powerful, that your ancestors in the future, like your future generation will look back and say, like, yeah, that was my grandma. She endured that, and this is what she did. And because of that, she stopped generational curses because of her. Like, isn't that powerful? Isn't that something that you want to be known for? Something that's powerful, impactful in your line? Like, what's that story going to be? It all becomes what you decide it becomes.
Yeah, it's good. I mean, those are some good reminders. Generational curses are huge. So just because I know the listeners are going to want to know, because there's a lot of emotion now with your mom. For those that are listening, we know you've been through the fire. So do you still have a relationship with her, or have you found that it was better for your mental health and your health to just not have a relationship with her or them,
Yeah, and that's a really great question. And that is a process I did end up going through. It was one of the things, as soon as I graduated from high school and I got married and had my family, that is when I started realizing, like, the things that happened in my past was abuse. So one of the first things that you're going to notice, and you have to, in order to come to terms with forgiveness and healing, is understanding that denial can be your biggest setback. If you keep denying and telling yourself, no, my parents are not like that, or so-and-so isn't like that, but they do things that irritate yourself and your self-worth, you have to, like, face the problem and realize that you're not going to recover. It's always going to haunt you if you're in a denial state. And so, yes, I did. Once I got pregnant, I realized a lot of things were triggering me. And I told myself, like, I have to heal. I have to recover from a lot of the internal damages, because I didn't want to put that on my child. And I was willing to do that, like, right away, because I was going to be having a child soon. I didn't want to put that on her. And so, yeah, I did come to the terms where I never, like, hated my mom. I've always loved her, but I wasn't willing to accept her abuse. And so I got to the point where I reached out to her multiple times and told her, like, hey, I forgive you. Here's the things that if you want a healthy relationship, you need to come to terms on your end and say sorry. And then, everyone's pretty forgiving, and let's just start fresh. And then we can, like, have, like, a healthy family dynamic, or else it's gonna divide really bad. And so I shared that with her a few times, and she just never apologized. And there are gonna be people that are gonna come into your life. They will not apologize. They will not say they're sorry. And so there's a point in your life you have to decide if it's worth it. Like, is it worth still, because the pain started going on to my children. And she started like treating my kids like, she didn't abuse them, but she treated them more like not their grandkids. And other grandkids came first. After trying everything I possibly could with my mom, I decided that was the end. And I cut everything off and I turned everything to God. And he healed me of my suicidal tendencies. Like, I never had those feelings of wanting to take my life. I started realizing my purpose and knowing, like, I was able to handle a lot of trials in my life a little differently. It was pure freedom. It really was, because I didn't have to worry about trying to fit in. I didn't have to worry about all these other baggage that I had to carry. Now I could just focus on self-development on myself and my children. And now I wrote a book. And so I want to encourage other people to find ways that they can heal. And that's the whole purpose of this book.
Well, definitely beauty for ashes. And that's kind of how our God does things, right? I think every one of us goes through something really painful. And if you've lived long enough, you've gone through something really tragic and painful. And I mean, really, truly, like, either God redeems you and he redeems the pain and he makes it into something amazing and forms something incredible in your life that you can now share with others, or you don't believe in God and he doesn't. It's one of the two. Either you go through things for a purpose and a plan and nothing is wasted, and all of your pain and tears are to create something absolutely incredibly beautiful for you and others. Like this beautiful tree with deep roots that has fruit growing and it feeds people. It's got those deep roots because of the drought, because of the pain, because it's had to reach for those water sources. It had to figure out, how to get fed. And then it makes this incredible fruit, and other people now have nourishment and a source of joy from it. And it's an incredible story. And I'm so amazed and happy that you went from a little 3-year-old girl with such incredible tragedy to the woman that you are today. Like, it's really wonderful. And I'm sure that your book, Strength for Scars, is going to just be such a beacon of light to other people. And I also wanted to add too, Avonley, that I don't know if you've ever read the book, A Boy Called It, but yeah. So when you said you just didn't understand why your adopted mom chose you, as the abused child. It's a very common form of abuse to choose one child to hate and to focus all your anger and disgust onto. And it doesn't mean that there's anything different between you and the next kid. And it could be a biological kid or an adopted kid or a step kid or any other kid. It doesn't matter, because even in this book, in A Boy Called It, once the little boy was taken out of the home into a foster home and rescued, probably 8 or 9 years old, then the mom just focused on the brother. And the little boy went to school and saw that his brother had bruises and cuts and horrible signs of abuse, because she just went to another kid to focus all her hatred and anger on. And it really had nothing to do with the child. It was just how much she self-loathed and hated herself. But I think the sad thing is when the other parent, like the dad, like your dad, the child called it his dad, they don't do anything. And it's almost more painful when that alternate parent doesn't do anything to rescue you or to stop it. And I think that's where sometimes people get really disappointed in God, because they're like, you're God. Like, you could have rescued me. You could have saved me. You could have taken me out of the pit. But, the Bible says that God's ways are not our ways. And I'm not trying to say that abuse is okay. It's a huge deal, especially when you're a little child and you don't understand. All of that is huge. But I will say that Corrie ten Boom wrote a book when she was in the Holocaust, and she was in concentration camps, and the people that she loved the very most were killed by the Nazis. And while she's in that camp, her sister, who was being so abused, said, "There is no pit that is so deep that God's love is not deeper still." And her sister kept telling her that. There's no pit so deep that God's love is not deeper still. And finally, Corrie ten Boom started to live by those words, and she clung to that hope that No matter how dark this world and people in this world get, God's love is deeper still. And I'm just so grateful, Avonlea, that you were able to find that and push yourself into it and find the healing that you needed and the forgiveness that you needed. That's a really beautiful story.
Oh, thank you so much. What you were saying, it really is the mindset, the hope. Hope is what's really going to get you through. And knowing that God's going to be there to help you get through it, put your hope on Him.
Yeah, because you can choose your perception. Your perception can be, how could, such an evil God like allow me to go through this? And you can be angry and bitter and just hate your life and hate everything about it. Or you can change that perception and just say, you know what, no matter what I'm going through or how dark it is, He's going to be with me. And I'm going to dig deeper to find that peace and that joy that cannot be described by this world. And if we can dig deeper into those things, those spiritual things, and make that our source, God will literally sustain us through any single thing we go through in this life, no matter how hard it is. And your story is a testament to that.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Avonlea. We so appreciate you being here today, and we'll definitely make sure that people have links to reach you in our podcast platform and on YouTube. But thank you so much for your time, and we appreciate you. If you're carrying scars, you are not disqualified. You're proof that healing is possible. If this conversation brought you hope, please subscribe and leave a rating or comment on any podcast platform. It helps us reach the next survivor who needs it. Share one word below, faith, forgiveness, or boundaries, and tell us why. Links to Strength of Scars are in the description below. Remember, you are not alone. We're with you, and you are deeply, deeply loved. Thank you for taking the time to listen today, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Have a wonderful day.